I want you to imagine something. Imagine that for 3 years, the last thing you did every single night before you fell asleep was send a goodnight message to someone. 3 years of time zones and missed calls and rescheduled video calls and airport goodbyes that never got easier no matter how many times you did them. 3 years of only 6 more months and we'll close the distance soon, and you're the only person I want. 3 years. And then one morning you wake up and send your usual good morning message and it delivers, you can see it delivered, and there is no reply. You wait an hour, you send another, delivered, no reply, you call, it rings, no answer, you call again, straight to voicemail, you wait a day, a week, 2 weeks, nothing, no fight, no warning, no explanation, no closure, just silence. Complete, total, deliberate silence from the person who had told you 3 weeks earlier that you were the most important person in his life. That is what ghosting after 3 years feels like. Not like a breakup, like a disappearance. Like someone reached into your life and removed themselves so completely that you start to question whether any of it was real. My name is Lily, and I am going to tell you exactly what happened to the man who did that to me. Not because I went looking for revenge, I didn't, but because what happened to him happened entirely on its own. Karma, it turns out, does not need your help, it just needs time. Stay with me. Nathan and I met at a mutual friend's birthday party when I was 24. He was in the city for the weekend. He lived 8 hours away, working in tech, and we spent the entire party in the corner talking about everything and nothing in the way you only talk to someone when something immediate and real is happening between you. He asked for my number before he left. He texted before his train had even pulled out of the station. We became long distance from the very beginning, which in retrospect should have told me something, that the entire relationship was built on the idea of eventually rather than the reality of now. But when you are 24 and someone makes you feel the way Nathan made me feel in those early months, eventually feels close enough to touch. We had a rhythm, video calls every evening, visits every 6 to 8 weeks, sometimes him to me, sometimes me to him. Shared playlists, shared TV shows watched simultaneously in different cities, the particular intimacy of knowing someone's daily schedule so well that you can picture exactly where they are at any given moment even when you are not there. He told me he loved me at 4 months. I said it back and meant it completely. By the end of the first year, we were talking seriously about closing the distance. He was looking at opportunities in my city. I had looked quietly at openings near him. We were doing the active, practical work of 2 people who intend to build a life together. That work continued into year 2 and year 3. The closing of the distance was always 6 months away, always just around the corner, always real and coming, just not yet. I understand now what I could not see then. The distance was not a problem Nathan was trying to solve. The distance was a feature. It gave him all the emotional benefits of a relationship with none of the daily reality of one. And when the daily reality threatened to arrive, when I had finally found a position in his city and was weeks away from accepting it, something shifted. I did not know that then. I found it out later, the hard way. The last real conversation Nathan and I had was on a Sunday evening in March. Video call, same as always. He seemed fine, distracted maybe, but I had learned over 3 years to read his moods, and distracted was not alarming. He asked about my week. I told him about the job offer. He said, "That's exciting." We made plans to talk Tuesday. Tuesday came, I called at our usual time. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I left a message. Breezy, not worried, assumed he was stuck at work. Wednesday, the same. Thursday, voicemail again. A text this time from me asking if everything was okay. Delivered. No reply. By Friday I was no longer breezy. I called Priya, my best friend, who had heard every Nathan story for 3 years and whose opinion of him had always been slightly more measured than mine. I told her what was happening. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, with the particular gentleness of someone about to say something honest, "Lily, how long has it been since he initiated a conversation?" I thought about it. I genuinely could not remember. "That's not a good answer," Priya said softly. I spent that weekend going back through our messages, weeks of them, and what I found was something I had not noticed while I was inside it. The rhythm had shifted gradually and then suddenly in a way I had attributed to his busy season at work. He had been responding, not initiating. Shorter messages, longer gaps between replies. The calls had been getting fewer. I had been the one scheduling them, the one following up, the one holding the thread. I had been the only one holding the thread for at least 2 months. The following Monday, his number went straight to voicemail. The Monday after that, my texts stopped delivering. He had blocked me. No explanation, no goodbye, 3 years, and he had simply closed the door and locked it from the other side. I want to be honest about the weeks that followed because I think the honest version is more useful than the version where I tell you I was sad for a week and then got stronger. I was not sad for a week. The grief of being ghosted is different from the grief of a regular breakup. In a breakup, however painful, there is information, reasons, explanations, a shape to what happened that you can process even if you hate it. Ghosting gives you nothing to process. It leaves you with a story that has no ending, just an abrupt silence that you can fill with infinite explanations, none of which you can confirm or disprove. I filled it with every possible version. He was hurt. He was scared of commitment. Something had happened to him. He had met someone else. He had never been real with me at all. The last possibility was the one that kept me up at night, the specific terror of 3 years of emotional investment being retroactively reframed as something performed rather than felt. Priya sat with me through most of it. She brought food I did not eat and watched movies I did not watch and let me talk in circles when I needed to, and said nothing when talking was not what I needed. She did not say you deserve better in the hollow way people say it. She said it once, specifically when I was at my lowest, and the way she said it made me believe it instead of just hear it. My mother Margaret called every day. She did not push. She did not offer opinions about Nathan that, while probably accurate, would not have helped. She simply called and asked how I was and listened to whatever I said and said, "I know, sweetheart," in the specific tone that only a mother who loves you correctly can produce. 6 weeks after the ghosting, I turned down the job offer in Nathan's city. Then I applied for a different one, in my own city, at a company I had been interested in for 2 years but had not pursued because I had been preparing to leave. I got an interview the following week. The new job started in May. A marketing coordinator role at a mid-sized creative agency, not a dramatic reinvention, but a genuine step up from where I had been, at a company whose work I actually respected, surrounded by people who turned out to be exactly what I needed without knowing I needed them. James was one of those people. I want to be careful about how I describe James because this is not, at its core, a love story, and I do not want the shape of this narrative to suggest that what healed me was finding someone new. That would be both inaccurate and the wrong lesson. What James was in those early months was a demonstration of what it looked like when someone was present, when someone initiated, when someone made plans and showed up for them and did not require you to hold the entire weight of a connection alone. He was not extraordinary in a dramatic sense. He was consistent. He was warm. When he said he would call, he called. When he made plans, he remembered them. When I was having a hard day, he noticed without being told. I had spent 3 years with someone who lived 8 hours away, and I had not understood, until I was around someone who was simply there, how much of my energy had been spent compensating for absence. I did not fall into something with James immediately. It was slow months of friendship before anything else, and even then careful and honest in the way I had not been careful and honest with myself during those 3 years of eventually. But I am getting ahead of the story, because 6 months after I started the new job, 6 months after the ghosting, 6 months into quietly rebuilding a life that was mine rather than structured around someone else's distance, I got a message. It arrived on a Tuesday evening. Instagram DM. He had apparently unblocked me at some point without my noticing, which told me something about the specific calculations involved in what he was doing. The message was long. Longer than I expected. Full of the language people use when they have prepared what they want to say and want it to land in a specific way, words like, "I've been doing a lot of reflection," and "I handled things badly," and "I think about our time together more than you probably know." He said he had been going through something. He said the distance had felt overwhelming. He said he had dealt with it in the worst possible way and that he knew that. He did not say what he had been going through. He did not explain what the worst possible way had required him to do beyond disappearing. He did not acknowledge the specific cruelty of blocking someone you have been with for 3 years without a single word. What he said at the end of the message was, "I miss you. I'd really like to talk if you're open to it." I read it 3 times, then I called Priya. She listened to me read the whole thing aloud. When I finished, there was a pause, then she said, "Lily, what do you actually want from this? Not what are you going to do? What do you want?" I sat with that question for longer than I expected, and what I found when I sat with it honestly was nothing. I wanted nothing from Nathan. Not an explanation, not an apology, not a reconciliation. The thing I would have given anything for 6 months earlier had simply stopped mattering. I did not reply to the message. Not then, not ever. I put my phone down and went back to the book I had been reading before it arrived. It was, I realized afterward, the first time in 3 years that Nathan had not been the thing that reorganized my attention. I promised you karma. Here it is, and I want to be honest that it came to me secondhand, through a mutual friend named Claire who called me about 4 months after Nathan's unanswered DM. She called to check on me, and then, because she knew me well enough to know I was past the stage where the information would hurt me, she told me what she knew. Nathan, it turned out, had not been going through something vague and personal when he disappeared. He had been with someone. A woman named Sophie, someone from his work, someone he had apparently been developing feelings for during the final months of our relationship, and had chosen, without the decency of a conversation, to simply redirect himself toward while leaving me in a silence I had to interpret alone. Sophie and Nathan had been together for most of the 6 months between his ghosting me and his Instagram message. They had moved in together, the step he had never taken with me in 3 years. Here is where karma arrives. 3 months after moving in together, Nathan ghosted Sophie. Not disappeared out of town, ghosted. Vanished from the apartment, ghosted. She came home from a work trip to find half the apartment empty and Nathan's number going to voicemail. He had done to her, with the particular efficiency of someone who had practiced it, exactly what he had done to me. Completely, without warning, without explanation. Claire told me that Sophie had reached out to mutual connections trying to understand what had happened, and in doing so had eventually found her way to people who knew about me. She had reached out to Claire specifically to ask if the pattern was familiar. It was. I did not feel triumphant when Claire told me this. I want to be clear about that because I think the triumphant version of this reaction would be dishonest. What I felt was something sadder and more complicated. A recognition that Nathan was not someone who had treated me badly because of something specific about me or about us. He was someone who was apparently constitutionally incapable of staying, of being present, of doing the difficult, unglamorous work of being in a real relationship with a real person who was actually there. The distance had never been the problem. Nathan was the problem, and Nathan was going to be Nathan regardless of geography. What I also felt underneath the complicated sadness was a quiet, clean gratitude. That I had not replied to the message. That I had let him remain unanswered. That by the time karma arrived, I had already moved far enough forward that it arrived as a footnote rather than a chapter. It has been almost 2 years since the ghosting. I want to tell you where things stand because I think the honest accounting matters. James and I have been together for 8 months. It is the quietest relationship I have ever been in, by which I mean the absence of drama is itself remarkable to me, because I had spent 3 years mistaking the intensity of longing for the intensity of love. What James and I have is not intense in that way. It is consistent and honest and present in the literal sense he is there, in the same city, in the same room, across the same table. Available in the ordinary daily way that I had convinced myself was less meaningful than the grand romantic gestures of long distance. I was wrong about that. The ordinary daily presence of someone who chooses you consistently is not less romantic than airport goodbyes. It is more, it is the real version of the thing I had been performing with Nathan for 3 years. My mother met James at Easter. She called me afterward and said simply, "He looks at you like you're not going anywhere." That was the whole review. It was the right one. I still think about Nathan occasionally, not with longing, not with anger, but with the distant curiosity you feel about a version of yourself that seems far away now. The Lily who waited 2 weeks for a text reply and invented explanations for a silence that had no innocent explanation. She was doing the best she could with what she knew. I do not judge her. I learned from her. The job offer I turned down in Nathan's city led me to the job I took in my own city, which led me to a team I love and work I am proud of, and a colleague who became something more. The apartment I moved into after the breakup, The one I found in a panic, alone, without the plan I had been making for years, is the apartment I have made entirely mine in exactly the way I want it without compromise. None of this is what I would have chosen if I had been given the choice on that Tuesday morning when my good morning text went unanswered. All of it is better than what I was choosing instead. If you have been ghosted by a partner, a friend, anyone who disappeared without explanation after you had given them real time and real trust, I want to say something to you directly. The silence they left is not information about your worth. It is information about their capacity. Those are two entirely different things, and the confusion between them is where the real damage lies. You do not need their explanation to close the chapter. You do not need their apology to move forward. You do not need them to come back and face what they did in order to be finished with it. You are allowed to simply move forward, without the ending they owe you, into a life that is better than the one you were building around their absence. Karma does not always look like Nathan and Sophie. Sometimes it is quieter than that. Sometimes it is simply the life you build while they are busy being who they are, a life so full and so genuinely yours that when they finally send the message, you put your phone down and go back to your book. Drop a comment if this story meant something to you today. I read every single one. And next